A warm welcome to this week's episode of Lost for Words, a podcast sharing the opinions, glories and the most interesting stories of guests. I am your host Jason, and today's story takes us to London. During World War II, the German bombing campaign, commonly known as the Blitz, was conducted against the United Kingdom. Carlton Vale, a street in the City of Westminster in London, was bombed heavily during the Blitz, and only one building on the street survived. That building was the Carlton Tavern. Fast forward 70 years into modern day London, property prices have soared and the sustainability of pubs has been declining sharply. The Carlton Tavern's building owners, CLTX, decided to sell the property to developers who were planning to turn the institution into a block of flats. However, the necessary planning permission was never obtained, and in April 2015, the developer nonetheless decided to call in the demolition team, and the Carlton Tavern was partially pulled down. Rob Cope was a part of the Rebuild the Carlton Tavern campaign group who quickly mobilised to protest the decision of the developer to pull down the building. The group eventually won a landmark judgement ordering the tavern to be rebuilt brick by brick. Rob joins me on today's episode to discuss in detail the chain of events that led up to and followed on from April 2015. These events have led to the reopening of the pub, which takes place next week after 6 long years. A quick housekeeping note before we get started. Please leave a rating or a review wherever you get your podcasts, whether that be Apple, Google, Spotify, Podbean or any other platform. It's the best way the podcast can grow and better content can be produced for you, the listener. It's your listening experience that matters the most. But enough from me, now on to today's episode of Lost for Words. Hi Rob, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you, Jason. How are you?
I'm good, thank you very much. And speaking to Polly, and she was saying you've been self-isolating and you had to miss out on the big media day. How was that?
That was frustrating, but one of my family woke up with what seemed to be symptoms. So, we had to do things properly. He had to stay home. He got a test later. I had to stay home as well because I was part of the household. And later, the test results came back and he was fine. So, all was okay the next day. But I just that's the rules.
Of course, and so you're linked to the Carlton Tavern. How close to the tavern do you live?
It's physically about a mile away from our house. It's the pub that's on the north side of Paddington Recreation Ground, which is like the biggest open space in our area. And Paddington Recreation Ground, that's just it's the place pretty much everyone local ends up going. So go and lie in the sun, go and play sports. Exercise dogs, let their kids run around, and then after a bit they'll get a bit thirsty. And where they're going to go? The pub there. So, it's a pub pretty much everyone goes to.
So the pub was unexpectedly quickly demolished in 2015. How many years prior to that had you been a patron?
On and off, probably about 10 years. I think, yeah.
So how would you describe the clientele of the Carlton Tavern up to 2015?
A bit of everybody, as I say. Because everyone used the park, so a whole load of people from the park would come up there. The sports fan would come down, particularly Saturday afternoon or Sunday lunchtime if there's big matches on. Of course, they were linked with the hockey club and the hockey pitch because they had changing rooms downstairs. There was good food, especially roast dinners on Sundays. It was originally set up in the 1920s as a family-friendly pub, and it was still, pretty much like that. You could go, you could bring your family in the dining room and have sort of, food and beer and coffee and soft drinks. And it's just south of the Kilburn High Road, so there's a lot of it's got big links with the Irish community. So there'll be lots of Irish folk in there. Yeah, as I say, a bit, a good sort of open home away from home for basically anyone who wants to come in. It was a sort of place that could appeal to many different audiences. I mean, it was a very big one for sport. Saturday afternoons or Sunday lunchtimes, you'd go in, and at the back next to the biggest of the big screen, there would be the football or the rugby on, and that would have the supporters crowd there. It was still a genuine beer pub. It was not, though it did good food. It didn't intend to be a gastropub, and and it was the gathering place for just about everybody locally in all those sort of flats and houses along Carlton Vale, the old people's flats just opposite it, roads like what is it, Randolph Road, sort of around the corner. It was the place to go, and it was a nice place and well kept, but it wasn't posh. It wasn't felt to be sort of upper class. Anyone was welcome.
How would you describe the atmosphere in there on a typical Friday night?
Loud, jolly, friendly. I mean, it's on the edge of Kilburn. It had a significant Irish clientele. To a certain extent, it was almost like the southernmost point in all the pubs that were along the Kilburn High Road.
Yeah.
If you were going on a crawl or something. So it sold a lot of Guinness, shall we say. And
when did you first hear rumblings of a potential issue with the pub?
To be honest, I didn't really pick up the rumblings, until it actually happened. I mean, it was just there. It was like, it was a centerpiece of the area. It was quite clearly, unique. It was very different from all the other buildings on that road because it was famous as the one that survived. As you know, everything around it is basically, post-war multi-story flats, and then in the middle of it, there's this, beautiful little classic, sort of classic 1920s family pub, looking sort of completely different, but somehow very much at home. And things happened, and it changed hands, and we heard about sort of I'm in sort of campaign for real ale, and there's things about Punch Tavern is getting rid of so many pubs, and we're not sure what's going to happen to them. But that really, they didn't say which pubs they were, and that really sort of went straight over my head. And then it was whatever day it was, me and my family. I mean, I remember this bit. We were on the tube, going to, I think, see a friend or someone who lives near Barbican, and there was a copy of either sort of Metro or the Evening Standard on the seat, and my partner picked it up, had a look at it, and then turned a few pages, and there was this sort of, at the time, quite little story on, from the later news pages about, scandal of pub demolition quotes without permission. And she said, "Isn't that one of ours? Isn't that isn't that the Carlton?" And I sort of looked at it and was like, "God, it is." And as I say, it was only a little story, but we just went on. We just went on with whatever we were doing that day. Went to visit a friend. Came back and a bit later. Just went round next time we went to the park, and wreckage. With what is it about the demolition had suddenly stopped, and stuff like bits of the TV screen still hanging off the wall, and just this great pile of masonry and bricks and rubble, and just went, what?
So when I was speaking to Polly, she was saying that she was giving me the run through of the Guardian article. She was saying that, and I was reading about the Historic England had come and taken sort of brick by brick details of the building.
Yeah.
Whose idea was that to get them involved?
To be honest, without looking it up, I don't know. I mean, there'd been, as you probably know if you've followed it, there'd been a planning application just about a year before, in which the owners, the now notorious CLTX, had applied to knock the whole building down, put up a rather large, ugly, and expensive block of flats, with a bar still called the Carlton built into the ground floor, and that got recommended by Westminster officers, but it actually got voted down by councillors. Not ironically so much because of the historic interest of the pub, but I think because they couldn't come to an agreement over whether the building was too high for the area, because you could see it from the park, and also the amount of money being offered by the developers to go into Section 160 into affordable housing. And it was only afterwards that thought went round various people about just how near it had come to being legally demolished. And a lot of people, I think including myself, had assumed it was under some level of protection. We just assumed it was listed, and it wasn't. And so people, probably including Polly, not me, because I got sucked in later, started looking at the legal status of the pub, realised it was very, very vulnerable, but also that it hadn't had any historic recognition, except I think the Campaign for Real Ale got it listed as sort of one of their top level historic pubs, particularly its interior, because it's one of the few remaining pubs of that design, of that period, and by that architect. And they started poking around how to get it listed, and that brought them to Historic England. The developers somehow picked up what was going on. Well, of course they picked up because Historic England obviously consults the owner about it, and things started moving on that. And that ended up with them deciding to force the issue by bringing in a demolition ball.
So, do you think that the demolition was brought forward quite hastily because the Grade 2 status being confirmed was looming large, and that would have then thrown a spanner into the full demolition?
I don't know CLTX, and its head, Ori Caliph, is notoriously reluctant to be quoted, interviewed, or even return telephone calls. Again, I think Polly is one of the few people who's managed to get many words from him, because I don't think he realised that, of course, she speaks Hebrew. I think they just thought it was worth a try, and that given that the council hadn't itself expressed a great interest in the historic significance of the pub when it last came for a planning meeting, I think they decided that the worst that was going to happen was they'd get bawled out, they'd get a bit of a slap on the hand. They might have to, they might have to pay some kind of fine or cost, but that they would then have the sort of fait accompli. They would have the site empty, no building, and therefore their notion of putting the building they wanted up, with if necessary a bar built into it, would be the best, most realistic option on the table, and they would get that through on appeal. Because remember, they'd already put in the appeal against the planning refusal, and that was going through the normal process of an appeal, before they rolled the demolition crew in. Basically, they massively underestimated the reaction.
So what was the reaction like? Was the group already mobilised in advance, like in anticipation for the demolition happening, or was only when the demolition happened? No, because apart from anything else, various people who later got involved, who were there when it was happening, said that they bitterly regret that they didn't just go and sort of stand in front of the crew and either prevent or stop them doing any further damage. No one was expecting this. It was entirely the wrong. There was no notice given. It was entirely the wrong time to be doing it. As far as I remember, it was during the Easter holidays. It was a warm day. Windows all around the pub would have been wide open. The children would have been home in their houses, in the gardens, in the park, in the street. So apart from being, unlawful, it was really, 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 really irresponsible, and potentially broke every relevant health and safety regulation you can think of. So, nobody expected the Spanish Inquisition, and nobody expected the Wrecking Ball, until it happened. So would you say there was one person who led the petitioning, or was it very much a joint effort?
Amalgam of different people, and particularly different groups. I mean, Polly had quite quickly put something up on Facebook. Yeah. A group of people around the ward councillors quickly started organising meetings, and because at the time Maida Vale was a ward in Westminster that was politically split, it had recently gone from having 3 Conservative councillors to 1 Labour and 2 Conservative councillors. So that meant that anything from them was going to go into both the Conservative Party and the Labour Party locally and be the issue. Because, Westminster is generally politically quite split. The south of the city is heavily Conservative, the north is quite heavily Labour. But this was like something that pretty much everyone could unite behind. Something in Westminster had been wantonly destroyed without any kind of permission. And in particular, Westminster City Council, which had been regarded as fairly friendly towards developers, and got a bit of had a certain amount of criticism for a fairly light touch approach to development. It had discovered that at least one developer was taking them all together much too much for granted, and they were furious. Everybody was furious and were baffled, but then very, very angry indeed. And this was a universal response, and that was covering sort of Conservatives, Labour, councillors, locals, neighbours, the local Irish community in particular, who regarded the pub as being a standard place to meet.
Like a stronghold for them.
Yeah, it was. Because what came out later was all these memories of, we had so and so's wake in there, or that's we had my cousin's christening, in the back dining room, that sort of thing. It was a place that was full of memories, and people felt that, as well as the building, their memories have been trashed. So it was very, very personal.
If there hadn't been such a broad joint effort from the community and that outrage, would the council have acted at all?
I think they'd have done something. Okay, let's be clear. Certainly from ones I spoke to, I mean, Conservative voters and activists were as angry as everybody else, and they were more or less laying siege to City Hall, demanding quick and drastic action. I think they fairly quickly convinced the city's leadership that, apart from anything else, the council was being publicly embarrassed. It looked as if it had lost control of its development, and it was going to have to do something to recover the situation and recover its reputation. And fortunately, it was the council was prepared to pretty much throw everything, including the kitchen sink, into the battle.
Did anyone from the Rebuild the Carlton Tavern group, was there any contact or engagement with the demolition company?
I think someone talked to them, but it was fairly clear that they've been brought in just as a job to do. And I mean, yes, I think they behaved pretty irresponsibly. It should have been fairly obvious to them that they were being invited to do something that was extremely risky, and they should have just refused. But
money talks.
They weren't the main protagonist. The fact that there was this sort of strange, silent, frankly rather malevolent-looking company that never came on the record, rarely even had sort of pictures of its directors, the CLTX, and this guy Ori Caliph, who again, as you know, was basically utterly silent. It just made them almost into the absolute perfect villain.
So with CLTX now out of the way, or having reincarnated as a brand new company, what now for the pub?
They change that fairly regularly, but firstly, CLTX is gone officially. They've renamed themselves Carlton Vale Limited, and they have one director who is it's not Ori Caliph anymore. It's what's his name? Ran Caliph, I believe, who is clearly connected to Ori because he's previously been working out of another address, indeed another closed pub that was associated with the old CLTX. But no, they do have, they do have a London-based address. There was a time when their details were changing very, very, very regularly. They would have one director, two directors, three directors, and they'd suddenly get rid of all of them. And there'd be a whole load of new directors. On one occasion, what was it? They had two directors. One who, from memory, was a gentleman who was legally based in Liechtenstein, and the other director was a corporate entity based in the Grenadines, in the Caribbean. But yeah,
Right.
they are. What can you say? They are. They are a very strange company, and they've never really explained themselves or their sort of what they wish to do. So it's very hard. It's very hard to understand them. But it's obviously very easy to dislike them because well, they don't usually give much reason to like.
So, did they appeal the council's decision to order them to rebuild the Carlton brick by brick?
Oh yes, and it went to a planning appeal inquiry in, when was it? Summer of 2016. Oh boy, was that a battle of the titans.
Talk me through it then.
They brought in mainly three experts. One was their planning consultant, who fairly quickly turned out to, I probably have to phrase this carefully, not have the UK planning qualifications he claimed to have on his note paper. So his credibility shot down quite fast. They had a historic advisor who basically only point seemed to be that it was, the rather obvious but irrelevant point that the building had been knocked down and it wouldn't be possible to, re-erect the original building. Whatever could be rebuilt, if it could be rebuilt, would be a facsimile, which really no one was questioning. And of course they'd be, it would be a different building. It would just look the same and incorporate as much of the old building as possible. And the architect of the flats that they wanted to build, who was mainly arguing that her building was really very nice and practical for the space, and who lost fairly quickly because nobody really wanted flats there. By that time, we just wanted our pub back, and that was it. And against them, the council, really sort of money didn't matter at this point. They brought in a very impressive and extremely expensive QC who pretty much minced up every argument that CLTX made, as I say, assisted by the extremely poor quality of the CLTX's advisors. It was, I sat through the whole thing, and it was, I wish we could have filmed it. It was quite a sight to behold. They lost. The only thing they didn't lose on was that the council had instructed them to rebuild in 18 months, and the inquiry inspector said, no, you can have 24 months. That was the only thing they got. They just got 6 months more time.
So did they have to take the plaster casting details and the structural stuff from Historic England because they had already logged it all down?
Historic England had taken, enormous numbers of details. So had, the council through the planning department, and of course, there was a lot of stuff on site. All right, the building had been knocked down, but examples of sort of window frames or balustrades or pieces of them, were there and were they were carefully preserved on site and off site. And I wasn't part of this process, but redesigns were made, and it was carefully rebuilt using new materials, but as much old and recycled material as possible, and where necessary, making new castings and replicas, on site from resurrected originals.
When did the rebuild begin? Do you remember?
Where were we? Not immediately. The site didn't really change very much for, what was it? Really till, from memory, it was about late 2017. I mean, they had, I understand, a lot going on in terms of meetings and designs and discussions, but there hadn't been very much on site. From 2017, 2018, things started happening, but by that time, almost all the CLTXs, 2 years, were close to running out.
And did the 2 years run out? Was it built within that 2-year timescale?
No, it was not, which is a potentially serious matter because a planning appeal inspector's instructions have the force of law, and breach of them can be a criminal offence.
So when was it actually completed?
I never got inside because it was a building site. The outs, we watched its resurrection with obviously great interest, and it was the actual structure in terms of looking like it from the outside seemed to be done by early 2020. But I was told there was still a lot of work to be done inside, and of course, come about a year ago, we had all the restrictions around coronavirus coming in. So obviously that delayed things further.
So by the time the March lockdown started, the outside had been built, but the inside still needed a lot of work, or so you were told?
That's my understanding. I mean, final details are still being done now, and indeed, things like completing the kitchen. My understanding is that's still going on now. I mean, they're going to open on April the 12th, but they said it will be with a sort of limited range of food because they haven't got the full kitchen yet.
Does Homegrown Pubs, the company, now own the land, or do they only have a lease on the pub itself?
Well, no. Okay, CLTX became, renamed itself, Carlton Vale Limited. Yeah, that was the beginning of this year. They still own the land and the building. Yep. Homegrown Pubs have got a 20-year lease on the ground floor and the basement, not the first floor. The first floor, we understand, Carlton Vale Limited still have ideas about making flats upstairs so that they can at least get some return on their, no doubt, substantial costs that way. Because the pub leaseholders don't control upstairs. They haven't got a lease for that. But I mean, no planning application has yet been made for any proposal to put flats in now. And okay, sorry, there was the old CLTX did previously apply to make flats upstairs, before Homegrown Pubs and Ben and Tom came on the scene. But the planning proposal got very short shrift. I'm not sure it even got. Formally tabled. I think the council just said that this is, this is not part. This is against the instructions we made previously. So no, you can't do it, because the instructions were to restore the pub as it was before, and not put in a flat conversion upstairs. However, now that the pub is presumably largely complete, I believe that Carlton Vale will be trying to have another try at this. That will have to be considered by the council again, but I very much doubt it has any chance of getting anywhere. The council has invested huge time and resources in this, and I don't think they're going to put up with any further messing about.
And have you met Ben or Tom?
No, I've spoken to them, but again, I was rather hoping that I might be able to on Monday, but because of the self-isolate, I couldn't. I mean, no doubt I will meet them, once it reopened, or if not before, if possible. But
do you know anything about their vision for the pub, and do you feel it's safe in their hands?
I think so. They clearly realise, that it's an absolutely unique pub, and that particularly now that its history, that it has a history, that it's now known literally all over the world because of what happened to it and the fight back over it, and they get that it's a pub that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people and groups, and they want to respect that. So, I mean, they've said that there will be, some sports on TV. There will be sort of cask and craft beer, I believe, so that it's not going to be a gastropub. I mean, pubs are very expensive to run now, so they have to, they have to have the freedom to make something sustainable out of it. But yeah, I think its future is safe in their hands.
How will you feel when it reopens? Will it be the end of a long, hard road?
I actually really don't know, because the whole thing's now mixed up with, it's not just that, trying to get that pub rebuilt and, with landlords inside it and reopened. It's all now mixed up with all the sort of pain and limitations and closures and lockdowns of the pandemic of the last year. So it's going to be starting to reopen, exactly the same time as pretty much every other pub in the country starts to reopen. So I haven't been in a pub, since they were, it feels like, briefly, reopened with restrictions, whenever it was. I think it was last October. So I suspect I'll just see my pint sitting there and start crying, because it has been a long, long struggle.
What will your first order be at the bar?
Well, a pint of whatever bitter or IPA they're going to have. But I've seen Camden Brewery vans outside, so presumably have theirs. But yeah, preferably whatever's on a nice straightforward hand pump, nice clear brown with a decent head on it.
Thanks so much for your time.
That's fine.
Take care. Thank you so much. See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you once again to Rob Cope for taking the time to speak to me. It was a brilliant insight into a truly excellent victory for the layman against bigger business and ruthless capitalism. The Rebuild the Carlton Tavern group on Facebook remains active and engaged. Please get in touch with them for any additional information. Quick acknowledgements as ever to finish off. The Lost for Words logo was made by AZR Creations and the music and sound effects are from zapsplat.com. Please stay in touch and stay engaged with us. We can be found on Twitter or Instagram. The handle on both is at Lost4WordsPod. I am your host Jason, and I will see you next time for another episode of Lost for Words.